Welcome back to Project Bumblebee. In this episode, we're going to replace the fuse box and restore the wire harness. I'll also show you how to splice wires so that you'll never use a crimp connector ever again, please. And we'll also have some fun with chemistry. Let's get started. Welcome to my harness. They don't make these new anymore, so when you get them, they look like this, and you really have to inspect every square inch of them to make sure they're cool. This right here is a mess. Here's the main harness coming out of the car, and there are crimp connectors on all the wires that lead directly to the battery. We got 4 crimp connectors here, and then on the other side, closer to the battery, guess what? More crimp connectors. This is really not good, so I'm going to have to change these out first. It feels so satisfying to do this. So there are 4 wires here. 2 of them are of a larger gauge and 2 are a smaller gauge in this particular harness. I really think that crimp connectors should be outlawed, especially since it's so easy to create a solder connection that's actually stronger than the wire itself, unlike this. Now I'm doing this on the bench because it's just a lot easier than showing you on the car. We've got 2 wires here. I've stripped off an end from both of them. And I'm going to untwist the wire a little bit and then start to splay them out, because what I want to do is have them splayed like this and then marry them together, kind of like fingers intertwining or shuffling a deck of cards. And then once that's done, just twist and combine them all together, make sure they're all touching really well. And this is looking pretty good already. It almost looks like the wire does underneath the insulation. So I'm going to pull an individual strand from another length of wire, and then because this is a thicker wire, I find that they can benefit from being tied around, almost like using this little wire as a baling wire to hold everything tight, and it'll make it easier to solder as well. So you can see it's nice and tight, and the wire is around it, and it's ready for soldering. I have one of these helping hands things, and they really do help. You can put something to cover the alligator clips if yours are really strong. Mine aren't, so I'm not worried about them going through the insulation. Here I've been warming up my soldering iron with a big wide tip. I've got a wet sponge so that I can clean the tip, make sure it's properly tinned, all that stuff. There are lots of videos out there on soldering technique. It's not really hard, but you do need to solder to do this properly. I have rosin core solder here and also some flux, which I can coat the joint with. I'll take a little brush and get some of the flux, paint it onto the joint itself. That's going to help the solder wick in. Then I'll grab the soldering iron, put it underneath the wire, underneath the joint. That's the most important thing. You want to heat up the wire. You can see the flux starting to smoke a little bit here. You want to heat the wire so that the wire actually melts the solder, not the iron itself. You can see how the wire is accepting that solder, and it's wicking right in, and gravity is also pulling it down. So that solder is filling all the gaps between every strand in the wire and making it super strong. So this looks really good. The solder is consistent all the way throughout. Everything looks very solid, and the wire itself is stronger than it was when it left the factory. Another important thing to do is to make sure you slip your shrink tubing on the wire before you combine the wires. Otherwise, you could find yourself in a situation where you can't get the shrink tubing on. You got to pull it apart. So make sure it's in the middle and grab our heat gun and just hit it. Now you want to go from the sides first to get it to shrink, and then hit the middle. That's looking amazing. And there you have it. A finished soldered splice done the right way. I've done this on all 4 of those wires that I showed you before, and now it's just time to put the terminal on. So I've got a 30 amp copper terminal here. I've got the 2 wires, and I've stripped off the ends of that. Now I'm not going to twist these 2 wires together because they're pretty heavy gauge, and that's just going to make a really clumpy kind of thing that'll be hard to crimp down on. So I'm just going to leave them straight and put the insulation right up against the edge of the connector. Then grab like a linesman plier or something else, and these are copper, so they bend down pretty simply. Just take one side to bend it down, hold them both, and the other side, when you bend it, really secures the connection. And that's pretty tight itself, but I'm also going to wick in some solder. We'll do just like we did before, where I'll heat the wire and the connector up first and get that ready so that the solder can wick in and really make a strong connection. And you can see that it's wicked in there, it's nice and silver. And now the final step, we'll grab this shrink tubing and hit it with a heat gun, and it's ready for another 50 years of service. Time to stop procrastinating and dive into that fuse box. This should give you a pretty good idea of why I've been procrastinating this a little bit. The fuse block is broken in 2. There's all kinds of non-stock things in here like this. Then there's this weird wire with a crimp connector and small gauge wires, and I don't even know where this goes. But hey, it's fused at least. Look at this. Here's my replacement fuse block, but it's really tarnished and kind of crusty and needs to be cleaned up to have good electrical flow. It would take forever for me to hand polish all of those connectors or use an emery cloth to like scratch them clean. So instead, we're going to let chemistry do the hard work for us. You're going to love this. All we need is distilled white vinegar and table salt and a Ziploc bag. We'll just pour the vinegar into the bag at a decent enough level to cover the fuse block. Then some salt, a couple of tablespoons or so. Then we'll shake it a little, make sure everything is good and mixed together. And then just drop the fuse block in there. Make sure that it's fully coated. Leave it sit for like 5 minutes or so. Well, it's only been a couple of minutes and it's already looking a lot better. Wow. It's looking pretty clean there. It's pretty amazing. Wow. Look at that. It's bright and shiny copper all around. The only dirt is in between the terminals, and I'll just attack that with a toothbrush. It'll be pretty simple to do that with some Dawn or something, dishwashing soap. Now we just have to rinse it off to stop the chemical reaction. And here's the finished product, my bright, shiny fuse block, just cleaned with vinegar and salt, and then I took a toothbrush to the dirt in between. Now I have to swap over all the terminals from this broken fuse block. We'll just get the right orientation of this. So we have screws up and screws up in that way. Let's hope I don't screw this up. So we'll just pull the wires off one at a time and place them into the same connections on the new fuse block. And so on and so on. And I just have the last one to do here. All right. Looking good. There's the broken one, and here's the fresh, clean one. I love it. Now what we have to do is get these relays off the old bent panel. So you just pull up a little bit and then use a plier to squeeze the rubber a touch. Just give it a little help so that it comes right out of the hole. And I'll clean them up too as long as I'm at it. I'm going to replace all the relays, of course, but might as well clean them while I'm here. All right. Now I'll just take the new fuse block against my freshly painted frame here, and then put the screws in, get it secured, and now I just have to put the relays in on this new frame. So we'll push on that, you kind of squeeze, and same kind of deal, just take the plier and pull back a little to give it a little help. Then this relay in the corner kind of snaps in with a little clip. Now here beneath the fuse box is where you'll find a lot of really bad splices. I mean, just look at this one here. Also, this has got like duct tape or gaffer's tape or something around it, and there's another big bulge here. Look at this crusty gaffer's tape or duct tape or something. If you're going to work on your car's wiring, it really helps to have a donor harness so that you can keep all the colors consistent and harvest these wires as you need them. Here's something fun. It looks like in the past there must have been a short on one or both of these circuits, and there's some melting here and some really bad repair, so I'll have to fix that. I'll go to the donor harness and find the same exact wires. And here they are. Just got to clip it out and then I'll splice it in. I just finished doing that solder splice like I showed you. I ran out of black shrink tubing, but the red works just fine. And I'll just put the heat gun on this and get it protected. Shrink it up. Okay, the fuse block has been replaced and all the wires are taken care of. Now that I finally have the fuse box all switched over and there's no more janky connections, it's time to inspect the rest of the harness and get cleaning. So I'm just going to clean the wires up. While I'm doing that, I want to make sure that there's no breaks or anything that could potentially short as I do this. So far, this harness looks really solid. I mean, there's a few connectors that are missing, but it's cleaning up well. Tuck these wires back into their little home. To do the job right, you really need a few rolls of this stuff, fabric harness tape. Be prepared to do a lot of wrapping, and I'm not talking about the hip-hop kind. It's helpful to have a helper too. Some of the factory harness has thin tape that's kind of spaced apart, and other parts of the harness there's no spacing and they use thick tape. So I cut the roll. I took a sharp razor blade and went down just a couple of layers deep so that I could create a thin strip of tape. And because the tape has a fabric underneath it, as soon as you start pulling on it, it just keeps that cut going. It's pretty cool. So I can make something that looks more like the factory, even with this wide roll. As I'm getting ready to put the harness fully into the car, I've noticed that some of the wire hold downs are missing, so I'm gonna go make some new ones. This is just like roofing flashing aluminum that I can cut with a tin snip. It's really bendable, just like the original ones. Mix up a little bit of JB Weld. I'm gonna put a little bit of that stuff on the aluminum piece and then place it down into the spot on the car where it's missing. This is a whole roll of material that covers those wire hold downs from 914 rubber. I'll show you how that goes on. You just take this piece here that I cut off the roll and squish it a little bit so it fits over the hold down, and that's it. Once the wire goes in, it'll be properly secured. Now I still need to find some connectors for this harness before I can put it in fully, but that's going to happen pretty soon, so if you haven't subscribed already, please do and come along for the ride with me. Thanks again, as always, to 914 Rubber for supplying parts for this build. I really appreciate you watching. Be safe and enjoy.